Story 1. Colon cancer. 6 years clear though. Update. Thank you all for the comments and support. To sum it up, in December 2018, I had sharp pelvic pains and constipation, so I went to see my doctor. After addressing the bowel issues, I mentioned that I had seen blood in my stool. Well, that triggered an examination, and sure enough, there was blood. A week later, I had a colonoscopy. I actually woke up and saw the tumor. In recovery, the doctor told me it was cancer even before the biopsy. I did not take it well. 2 months later, I had surgery to remove the tumor and about 9 inches of colon. 2 of the 18 lymph nodes they collected were also positive. That resulted in 9 rounds of chemotherapy. That was difficult. Anyhow, after CT scans and colonoscopies, I am still clear. The lingering effects are some bowel issues and neuropathy in my fingers and toes, but it is pretty mild at this point. A DNA test said that I have no predisposition and no family history. Go figure. A colonoscopy saved my life, and it has become a personal mission to get everyone of a certain age to get one. If you are 45 or older, please get checked out. Story 2. Cancer. Thankfully, I made it out alive. I use my experience to help others and advocate for better, more affordable care. But boy, the last year has been hell, and I have likely permanent effects from the chemotherapy, not to mention the mental trauma it inflicted. Story 3. Obsessive-compulsive disorder. Intrusive thoughts are absolute hell. Also, depersonalization was really scary, and a gastrointestinal virus I got last Christmas had me crying and dry heaving on the toilet for 2 days. Story 4. Edit. Guess I didn't expect this many people to respond. Thanks for the kind words and sharing your stories. It's nice to feel like there are others that just get it. I know a good portion of the world population has an inflammatory bowel disease, diagnosed or otherwise, but the visibility isn't quite the same as other awful diseases. There are obvious reasons why that's the case. Nobody enjoys talking about lots of pain combined with uncontrollable, often bloody bodily functions, so there's some comfort in seeing there are others who understand. Let me restate something important. It took me 20 years to figure out medication that works. I don't recommend that. Something that's really hit home for me since feeling better is how much time I've lost to this thing, and it makes me sad. I think back to all of the experiences I missed out on because I couldn't get on a plane or I didn't feel like I could be out in unknown places. I'm sad because I could have fixed this through surgery so much earlier and proceeded to live my life versus selfishly fighting. That fight had a cost, and that hurts just as much as the disease. So, if you have the opportunity to fix things through surgery, do it. Don't spend more of your time miserable than you have to. I have ulcerative colitis. When it was flaring at its worst, every day it felt like someone jamming a hot poker and twisting it around in my insides, combined with a constant feeling of needing to defecate and intermittent nausea. I normally weigh 160 and got down to about 125. I was tired, pissed off, depressed, and my nerves were constantly on edge. That went on for about 1.5 months before I got some measure of relief. I've since found medication that works for me and have been in remission for a little over 2 years. But for 20 years before that, I was in a consistent flare with some or all of the above happening. Story 5. I had cancer. Thankfully, it was caught early and in remission now almost for 3 years. But the whole process has caused complex post-traumatic stress disorder that has only made my depression and anxiety worse. So for me, mental illness is the worst as it never goes away. Some days are good, and some are not so good. Story 6. Anorexia. The physical changes and symptoms are awful, but the worst for me is how it destroys your brain. I just can't see the world like I used to. I wonder if you ever fully recover from it. I am trying. I posted this not expecting anything, just wanting to share my frustration regarding my illness and state. I didn't expect such support. Thank you so much, everyone. It means a lot. We are really doing our very best to recover and find happiness in this life. Story 7. Meningitis and encephalitis. Was in the intensive care unit, mostly was a vegetable for almost 2 months. Turned 21 in there. Then over a month in a step-down unit. Then almost 2 months learning how to walk, talk, and do everything all over again. 0 out of 10 would not recommend it. Story 8. COVID in 2023. I was the director of nursing in a nursing home, and we worked so hard to keep any of our patients from getting COVID. At the nursing home down the road from us, they had 96 deaths that first year, and our facility had none. I thought things were going so well, and the COVID crisis had really seemed to die down. A friend and I went to Disney World in September 2023. We stayed a week and had a great time. Flew back on the plane. Felt like I had a little bit of a scratchy throat as I was driving home from the airport, but nothing to worry about. Airplanes are so dry that sometimes my throat feels scratchy anyway. By the time I got home and in the door to my house, I was flat on my back for the next 3 weeks. Ended up with COVID pneumonia. Before I got it, I knew it could be bad. I saw the numbers. I knew people died, but I had no idea how bad it could really get. I had to sleep sitting upright for 3 weeks. In and out of the emergency room too. But they did not want to admit me because they felt like I was safer at home. There were nights when I sat up all night and thought if I can just take another breath, if I can just take one more breath. All night long. Felt like my lungs were glued together. Couldn't inhale. I couldn't exhale. Couldn't get one good breath. The fever and the headaches were debilitating. I was fortunate that I had family who could go back and forth to the pharmacy and the grocery store for me. They left things on my front step so they wouldn't have to come in. But there were days when I didn't have the energy to even crawl that far. Took over a year for me to feel like I could breathe normally again and gain my energy back. Story 9: Hashimoto's disease. It's autoimmune hypothyroidism. Before getting diagnosed, my hair was falling out. My joints ached so badly I could hardly walk to my mailbox. I couldn't stop sleeping and gained an ungodly amount of weight in a very short period of time. I felt like I was circling the drain. I'm being treated for it now, but I have heart issues as a result of it. I do not recommend it. Story 10. Epilepsy, it's mental and physical. The pain of waking up from a seizure is so bad you feel like you're going to die, and it's mentally tolling because you never know when one is going to happen. Story 11. Endometriosis. I had issues for years, including life-saving surgeries. But one time it was far worse than the others. I remember doctors telling me I was being dramatic and endometriosis cannot kill you. The football-sized growth that ripped my bowels apart, leaked E. coli into my blood, and glued my bladder to my colon would like to contest that. It took 20 years before they agreed to a hysterectomy. For some reason, the faint hope that I might one day use my uterus was more important than me living, or even having a life at all. And when they finally did it, they admitted there was so much damage. There was never a time in my life where I would have been able to carry a child. Story 12. Severe drug allergy to sulfa-based antibiotics. Many people have a mild allergy to sulfa that manifests with a rash and a low-grade fever. It's a nuisance, but not dangerous. My reaction the first time I took it was so mild that I didn't even remember that I had a problem with it, which was how I ended up being exposed to it again. That involved a rash, nausea, and a fever, but it resolved quickly. Still not a big deal. I didn't even connect it to the drug. I thought those symptoms were part of my illness. The third time, I was prescribed Bactrim for a urinary tract infection while I was already hospitalized for something else, and my system went completely haywire. Fever of 106 degrees Fahrenheit, hives, teeth chattering, uncontrollable shaking, then a complete psychotic break, hallucinations, delusions. They didn't know whether I belonged in the intensive care unit or the psychiatric ward. I ended up with heart arrhythmia and some kidney damage, but I did make a full recovery, and it is now in my medical records that I have a severe sulfa allergy. Story 13. Flu, proper flu. I've had bad COVID-19 3 times. Flu knocked COVID-19 out of the ballpark. I had a high temperature. I was shivering violently for days and nights on end and couldn't eat or drink. Anything I tried to eat or drink came back up as vomit. My body felt like it was shutting down and I was almost begging for death at one point. I was in my late 20s at the time and at the peak of health, and it absolutely destroyed me. Story 14. COVID-19 kicked my ass. I thought I would not make it. Also, when I first got sciatica and ate some bad pineapple, I lived on the toilet for 3 days. It was horrible. Story 15. Periorbital cellulitis went unchecked for several weeks to a month due to negligent doctors. I was 6 and my left eye was swollen shut. I went to several pediatricians who, despite my swollen eye, informed my mother that I was faking it for attention and to get out of school. I lost my depth perception. I remember seeing walls and doors zoom out, and I would constantly walk into walls and door frames because of it. Finally, my mother, a pediatric nurse, took me to an eye doctor who took one look at me and diagnosed me without any further questioning. I was immediately transported to the hospital and had emergency surgery the next day. I then stayed in the hospital for 1 month of intravenous antibiotics. I had my 7th birthday in the hospital. The hospital physician told my mother I was close to death. If she hadn't taken me to that eye doctor, I likely would have died. I recovered my depth perception but was left with a lazy eye. I stand here proudly to say that medical gaslighting is still a thing for me 25 years later. Story 16. COVID-19 on Christmas in 2021. I was crying at the top of the stairs because it made me want to pass out even going downstairs to get something to drink or eat. My husband and I were bedridden for 2 solid days and could barely make it to the bathroom. Less memorably, I was 10 or so and had food poisoning while in Florida. I vomited in the plain bathroom on the way home with no change of clothes. Story 17. I'm fortunate that it's not painful or fatal, but nearly 4 years ago, I got sudden onset severe ulcerative colitis. For the last 4 years, I've barely been able to leave my home unless I know I'm within 60 seconds of a toilet, or else I run the risk of having an accident, or I have to bring a portable toilet with me. Combined with the first year of the pandemic, I haven't been to a movie since late 2019, and I've only eaten in a restaurant twice in that same period, and it was a close call both times because of one out of order and one occupied bathroom stall. I've tried all sorts of medications, therapy, and diet changes, and nothing's worked. If my current medication doesn't work, and so far it's not, I'll need my entire large intestine removed in January, and then I'll have the rest of my life with a colostomy bag. I already have very low self-esteem and am always very self-conscious. So thinking about it really gets me down, despite following all of the stoma-positive content creators I can find. Story 18. Hand, foot, and mouth disease was horrid. I had blisters in my nose and throat. They also covered my hands and feet. Then, a month after recovering, my fingernails and toenails fell off. Story 19. Depression is the only one that has come close to killing me. I am doing much better now and have come to the conclusion that if mental illness wants to kill me, it is going to have to start shutting down my organs like a proper disease instead of getting me to do its dirty work for it. Story 20. Cholecystitis. It was worse than natural labor pains. Everyone says you feel gallbladder pains in your right shoulder blade. Nope. It felt like I was having a heart attack and I couldn't breathe without excruciating pain. I thought I was dying. Story 21. Severe Escherichia coli from contaminated spinach. It was so bad that my gastrointestinal system went in reverse, and I was vomiting what looked and smelled like liquid feces while the same came out the other end. All the while, excruciating abdominal pain made it impossible to leave the bathroom for 5 hours. Then came parts of my intestinal lining peeling off like sunburned skin and passing in 3 to 5 inch long chunks. I was admitted to the emergency room and was so dehydrated I was passing out trying to get into the car. They gave me intravenous fluids and strong drugs for the pain, hydromorphone, and nausea, promethazine. As the drugs kicked in, I drifted off and stopped breathing, so they had to continually give me sternal rubs whenever my respiratory rate dropped too low. After 6 liters of fluids, I was stable enough to be transferred to a room where I was given intravenous antibiotics and a nasogastric tube for liquid feeding. For days, the cramps and abdominal pain were excruciating. I eventually got to go home, but between the Escherichia coli and intensive antibiotics, the good bacteria was gone from my gastrointestinal tract. I had to stick to a regimen of probiotics and bland food for months while just about everything spicier than vanilla pudding gave me severe diarrhea. All said and done, it was about 4 months before I could eat anything without experiencing frequent bowel movements and constant dehydration. Story 22. I had a tumor in my pituitary gland, known as pituitary adenoma, which was causing breast leakage. I was 15 back then and completely unaware of what was happening. I had to take steroids for over 2 years, followed by some radiation sessions to reduce the tumor size. I'm 33 now, happy and healthy. Story 23. I've kept it secret because I still can. I'm still early. Parkinson's. I call into work when I'm bad. Tell them it's a cold or whatever. I'm not ready. God help me. For once, I am terrified. I haven't told my family yet. Story 24. Mycobacterium avium complex. I was a 26-year-old healthy American who got an infection that is usually found in immunocompromised people in third world countries. I woke up one morning spewing bright red arterial blood out of my mouth anytime I moved. The Mycobacterium avium complex infection ate away part of my lung, and the inside detached and abscessed, which ripped open an artery in my lung. I ended up losing most of the lower lobe of my right lung and spent 6 weeks in isolation. No real pain other than a sharp pain when the lung detached, but 6 weeks in isolation drove me nuts.